Why should we be interested in what's going on?
There is a cease and desist. It means you recall the resources that have been disbursed for any NGO, be it big or small, because
Which is like, you can like it needs to genocide. To me, the only thing that I'm seeing is a pattern of dependency, where
Yes.
we are very greatly dependent on American government to actually supply us these drugs. How can we create a system that can allow us? What measures do you think we can take to ensure that we get rid of the dependency syndrome?
that's the one thing the America and the West have done so beautifully. They have made us dependent on them. Firstly, for aid. Aid is the one thing that the Ugandan president Yoweri Museveni said, we will not accept aid from the West. He stood his ground and to this day we've seen the thriving economy of Uganda because they do not depend on the West for them to be economically stable. Hi, my name is Jerry and welcome to the M&J podcast alongside the Evocation podcast and Talk with the Nation with Temba Malomo. Today I am super excited because we're here at the headquarters of the Z Nations that is specifically located along Cairo Road opposite the main post office in Limbe Shopping Complex on shop number W4. Remember, if you want to reach and contact us, you can call us on 0972 328 or you can call us on 097 5030 This is the M&J podcast and Talk with the Nation collaboration that's happening here at Z Nation's headquarters. Mr. Malomo?
I'm very excited to be here back again, Mr. Jerry. And the topic that we're going to be talking about in particular is very, very deep. In it, that you told me about this in the morning. Kindly explain. It's got everything to do with the American government. It's got everything to do with the newly elect Donald Trump. Mr. Jerry.
By all means. I was really excited on the 20th of January 2025, on a Monday morning, when we heard news that the president-elect Donald Trump would be inaugurated as the 60th president of the United States of America. What great news. However, it came with sadness because 8 days into his election, today is the 28th of January 2025, we hear he has enacted executive orders. These executive orders, 5 of which are affecting Africa negatively. And I thought as the M&J podcast and the Evocation podcast and Talk with the Nation, we would be able to expound on this particular 5 orders that are affecting we, the African people. Firstly is the withholding of grant aid money coming to Africa. And we understand that $32 billion from the year 2023-2024 was disbursed into Africa. And he has put an executive order to cease and desist the relinquishing and disbursement of money coming into NGOs here in Africa. You must understand, our African economy is dependent, especially our health sector is largely dependent on this grant aid that comes from 3 conglomerates that are here in Africa, namely the USAID. Secondly, CIDES. Thirdly, PEPFAR. These are huge multinational conglomerates that are American that have impacted we, the African people. Secondly, the second executive order basically was him saying there's going to be a withdrawal from the WHO, the World Health Organization. I, for one, agree with that particular executive order. I think the reason to why Trump had facilitated the withdrawal of the US from the WHO is in light with what happened to the 2019 and 2020 pandemic. He said there was a gross mismanagement of authority and power by the WHO in order to subjugate countries into getting the vaccines and having false results. And so I think the mismanagement of the WHO had caused the second executive order that President Trump had signed between the 8 days after his inauguration. The third executive order was regarding how the African countries will be taxed accordingly, according to the executive order. For every export that's going to be coming out of Africa, specifically, we have 2 African nations that export some great stuff that benefits our economy, which is the Angola and Nigeria's crude oil. These are some net contributors to the African economy, as we will understand that the crude oil on the international market is highly demanded for production and growth of an economy. The third executive order, I don't know if I'm a third or the fourth, the third executive order that President Trump had signed was regarding the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement of 2010. Basically, he is rescinding the decision that America would support the reduction of carbon emissions on the international market, and there's going to be a curb. Basically, according to President Trump, he believes that the curb on carbon emissions have negatively affected the economy of America, because you compare America to China. China is producing more because they don't have any regulation or cap on carbon emissions on their economy, and hence they produce even more on the economy. However, the production of America has been curtailed because they have a limit on carbon emissions due to the Paris Agreement that they had in 2010. And hence they say, President Trump argues this is our economy has been truncated because of the Paris Agreement, and hence he has rescinded the decision to be a part of the Paris Agreement of 2010.
All right, we can straightly dive into exactly what you spoke about, which is already a lot. And I must imagine, even I don't really understand what you were just saying. I was just hearing stuff, and you mentioning all these platforms in which we're going to be deprived of as African. Why should we be interested in what's going on?
Right. I think the reason to why we should be interested is because the number one asset that a person has is his health. Minus a man's health, no matter how many billions you may have, good sir, if you do not have health, then you're a poor man. One thing that these multinational conglomerates do is they sustain the lives of the African people, because we understand that over 20% of the population in Africa is infected with the virus that causes AIDS, which is HIV. And the dependency of us as the African people in getting the drugs that, of course, is manufactured and produced and distributed by the American people is the ARV. Now, when the executive order has been signed by the president, he succinctly said there is a cease and desist. It means any NGO that is sponsored by the United States government as of today has been required, even if you had put in a full tank of you were going to go to Nagoya district in the southern part of Zambia, in order for us to distribute ARVs to the people who are of that community, there is a cease and desist. It means you recall the resources that have been disbursed for any NGO, be it big or small. There's been a demand for the resignation letter by so many project managers across Central and Southern Africa, and we understand that Sub-Saharan Africa is the hardest hit by HIV. So you must understand that when the ART and the ARVs have been recalled, then there's going to be a higher chance for a person who has the virus of HIV to
pass
spread,
it on.
to pass it on, because
Which is like you can like it need to genocide, because
Wow.
a lot of people not gonna have access to suppress the virus that allows the individual to actually pass it on to the other person. So what ends up happening is a pandemic in a way. A lot of people will be infected, and those who are already infected are gonna deteriorate in health possibly, and most especially people who are poor, right, are going to be strongly affected, because the richer class, obviously, they alternatively might already have other means of attaining or getting access of these drugs. That's what I'm understanding. Is it?
yes, because the ARVs are about $10 per bottle. That's a 30-day bottle. That's $10 per bottle. So only the rich will be able to access $10 times 12 months in a year.
And the poor are going to be left to spread it.
And
It's not a laughing matter, but they are in the process. God
Yeah.
forbid. Now, how can we arm ourselves? I understand that, to me, the only thing that I'm seeing is a pattern of dependency, where we
Yes.
are very greatly dependent on American government to actually supply us these drugs. How can we create a system that can allow us as and the African, what do they call it? What are we? The African, the whole thing, the whole
Continent.
the African continent. Thank you, Mr. Joy. The African continent, for us not to be greatly affected by this. What measures do you think we can take to ensure that we get rid of the dependency syndrome? We can't understand that the superpower that we had, the American government, is taking away the privileges that we had. And earlier this morning, I had made an example, if you remember, to say the only thing that I'm seeing is I made an example of you being, you representing America individually. If you are in a position to say, okay, Mr. Temba, I'm going to be providing you with breakfast every morning. I'm going to be bringing on your doorstep bread and milk. And then all of a sudden you wake up after a long time of doing exactly what we have established, and you wake up to say, okay, I think it's costly on our side. We're not going to manage to be able to come to you and give you the bread. For me, who's receiving that word, am I going to cry over the fact that, okay, Mr. Jerry has finally decided to say, I'm not going to give you the privileges that I used to give you, or maybe this is a time for me to start thinking about alternative solutions. I need to start maybe considering how can I sustain myself without Mr. Jerry? Is this the place where we are at as Africa, the African continent?
Yes. I think we're greatly dependent on the West for our economy to thrive and survive. I believe that there's a way that we can be independent from the West. Because one thing that President Kenneth Kaunda had said, he says, we do not want to be politically independent. We want to be economically independent because the West is subjugating we, the African people, because they have leverage. It's like a bulldog that you have a tie to and say, no matter how far you go, you will still come back on the leash. That's the one thing that the America and the West have done so beautifully. They have made us dependent on them. Firstly, for aid. Aid is the one thing that the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, said, we will not accept aid from the West. He stood his ground, and to this day, we've seen the thriving economy of Uganda because they do not depend on the West for them to be economically stable. One thing that we can learn from Yoweri Museveni is that we as sub-Saharan Africa should stand together united, just as we understand that the reason to why Donald Trump is really punishing us ultimately is because it's a power move. We understand he's trying to do something that is going to benefit the American people at the end of the day.
And also, it also exposes us to being liabilities. It's like a challenge on ourselves to say, okay, you are. He's been saying this the longest time. You are liabilities. So this is his claim, right? He's challenging us to say, okay, if we take away all the powers, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Now, the other ripple effect of this act also that I'm seeing is a situation where, deprive the people of access to get proper health services. And after the damage has been done, come back in and offer them a contingency plan, where, we're going to help you if you give us this or that. And still, it gets us out of position of being dependent. And we are more indebted at that particular point because we are so vulnerable. If we're going to be crying over the spilled milk, we're going to find ourselves being in the position where we are now very, very vulnerable to the point where when the solution is brought, it's going to have a lot of T's and C's that we cannot even meet up to, which will lead us into slavery back again, all over again. That's my assumption and my theory.
Your theory is not even an assumption. It's the thing that has happened in Zambia. Exactly how you've done it. The T's and C's is what we're actually facing today. Let me tell you a story of what happened in Zambia in the year 1974 to 1975. Before 1973, Zambia's dependency on the copper prices was everything. The only way we could get foreign exchange into the country is by selling off our copper. Now, one thing happened on the international market is there was the plummeting of the copper prices on the international market vis-a-vis the rise in the crude oil on the international market. This ultimately caused Zambia to have a fiscal crisis where we're buying our oil at a very high price, yet we are selling our copper at a low price, and hence it led Zambia to get into the most severe debt. To this day, we are still paying. What did the West do? They said, we see you have a crisis. We know that you have food insecurity because we're seeing the old women queuing up for them to have a bag of mealie meal. We're seeing that there is a scarcity of oil, some of the essential commodities an economy should have. What we can do is that we will give you a loan of this amount of money. Now, you know what the amount of money was, sir? It was $100 billion. The equivalent, of course, will fluctuate this amount because of inflation. $100 billion we will give to you, except on our terms. What are our terms? One, we want you to devalue your currency so that the kwacha will no longer be 1-to-1 with the United States dollar, but then the kwacha will now go from 100,000 kwacha to 1 United States dollar. Do you see what the West is doing? The second thing that they want is that they want you to be dependent. How much time do we have? Okay, the second thing that they want Africa to be dependent on the West by them dictating the copper prices on the London Stock Exchange. Hence, we do not have leverage on saying how much the produce that we give on the market. We do not dictate the prices. No, sir. We are told what the prices are, and all we have to do is say, yes, sir. Thirdly,
you've lost the thread of thought, and it was a very good point. And we're going to take a quick commercial, which We include us selling products, of course. We are, remember, we are in Z Nations. At Z Nation, at the head, Z Nation headquarters, this is where you will find us selling phones, computers, laptops, my pouch protectors. If you want to get yourself a proper phone, come to this place. You're gonna be met with a lot with good customer service. We have Mr. Roy, Mr. Monty, Mr. Benjamin. All these people are happy to receive you. Come. Yes, Mr. Jerry, let's go back on the topic. So what do you think? You haven't technically, according to you, of course, we are not commenting. Disclaimer, please. Can we put a disclaimer before?
We do not claim this to be our words, but we claim this to be statements of facts that are objectively existent and do not hold. These are not the opinions of the platform, the M&J podcast. No, our personal opinions. These are basics. These are basic facts that are out there, and that we're putting these facts to you, our listeners.
All right, fair enough.
That's not the best
We're gonna put it as a disclaimer. Anyway, going back to the topic, what do I don't feel satisfied with the answer that you've given me. It's got so many technical points. I do understand on how it went west when the Zambian government decided to have sex with the American government. Now, strategies. What do you think as a productive thinker? What do you think Africa, strategically speaking, needs to focus on for us to actually get an upper hand and an advantage to this puzzle?
There's a very radical method that Mugabe took, but then there's a very civil method that Nelson Mandela took. We can only learn from our forefathers, and our ancestors had taught us the best way. The radical way was to, of course, take back our land, as Robert Mugabe had done, and wage war against the American government. But look at where Zimbabwe is as an economy. America has taken out the ability to trade using Visa. You cannot use any bank transactions in Zimbabwe. They've relinquished the economy, and they've so crunched the economy of Zimbabwe to the point that it's been severed to its knees. We take a very smart yet effective way that Nelson Mandela had done. Dialogue. One thing that Mandela had pioneered was bridging a gap that was not only racial, it was a gap that was financial, but equally it was a gap that was spiritual. The only way you can fight a war and win successfully is when you fight it in the spirit. Good sir. There's one thing that happened in the book of First Kings. I think I'll put in the verse and chapter later on, where Jehoshaphat was faced by three kingdoms that had come to wage war against him. So he knew that the numbers that were against him were more than the numbers that he had in his military arsenal. Therefore, he consulted God and he went on a prayer and fast. He said, everybody, young, small, women, children, the old, the young, let us go on a fast and pray. And we ask God for direction in this particular war. When they prayed and they fasted, the prophet came to him and he gave the word to say that you will win victorious because you have prayed and sought the Lord. When they went out in battle, they put singers in front to sing and give praises to God. Behold, there was confusion in the camp of the enemy as they approached them, that they began to kill themselves amongst each other. And Jehoshaphat, the most memorable scripture in the Bible, says, believe God and you will be established. Believe his prophets and you will prosper. There's something about fighting a war spiritually before fighting a war physically or with the mind intellectually that will make us win. I know the American government is not out to get the African state, but of course it's a power move. And it may disadvantage us in one way or the other because he says it is a 90-day cease and desist, a freeze of all resources coming into Africa for the next 90 days. It means January, February, March. March the 20th is when we're going to have perhaps a change in mind by the United States government. He says we're giving this time for us to think and reevaluate whether investing $32 billion in the African economy is beneficial to us. And only after 19 days, if we see it benefits us as the United States government, then we will continue tying this, or we'll continue it at a particular percentage, or we'll renegotiate the terms in order for us to be advantaged as a country, because we cannot be spending $32 billion outside and yet our American people are suffering. I think the reason to why we fight this spiritually firstly, before we fight this intellectually and financially and intellectually, is because we wage war with spirits. Then when we win in the spirit, sir, we can win in the physical. I feel this is the best way we can approach this.
Amazing. And that was it. If you really want us to go deeper in this topic, please leave like, comment, and yes, everything that Mr. Jerry said in agreement, most especially with the last part, dialogue involving the higher deity, the Holy One, the Lord, the Creator, is going to bring us to a point of place where we get to the promised land as a nation. See you on the next one. And I enjoyed talking to you, Mr. Jerry, as usual.